If consequences have been proven to be ineffective in changing student behavior, why shouldn't we only use restorative practices? Restorative practices is not supposed to be a standalone way to manage behavior with students. That's not what it was designed to be. Restorative practices is designed to work with traditional consequences and PBIS because all of these ways of managing behavior are imperfect. And that's just the reality of how majority of the things that we have within schools, they're just imperfect because there's no perfect solution to do really anything. You need to take the best pieces and best components that exist within your school of what you have when it comes to traditional consequences, PBIS, and restorative practices, and make them work together. Everyone does traditional consequences differently. Some traditional consequences work better in some places than others. The way that I used to like one thing I'll step back and say I'm very much a proponent of zero. I'm a zero tolerance kind of person. I'm from Mississippi. I grew up as far south as you can be, and it was very. When I grew up, we were disciplined very punitive. And so, you definitely couldn't like veer off too much. Like you were kind of held in check by pretty much all the adults in our little town. And so zero tolerance is kind of something I understood. You're not allowed to get away with doing what you're not supposed to do. And so I think the idea of zero tolerance is not a bad thing. The problem is the execution of zero tolerance. Zero tolerance doesn't mean it has to be the same consequence every single time. It doesn't mean you have to suspend the student. It doesn't mean that you have to do this particular thing. Zero tolerance can mean that if somebody does something, we're going to do something to address it to where it doesn't happen again. And doing something to address it to where it doesn't happen again doesn't necessarily mean you're going to suspend. And to be honest, if you don't want it to happen again, a suspension is not the best option because a suspension does nothing to address the actual problem. And so that's what we looked at and how we figured out that we're going to address every single thing that students do, but we're going to do it in a way to hopefully rectify the situation to where the problem doesn't happen again, because that's what we're trying to focus on. We want to stop the problem. And so by figuring out how to stop the problem, you're addressing every aspect of the problem. So you're addressing everybody involved. You're addressing the underlying behavior that led to the problem. And so you're looking at that. And so what the traditional consequence, what the punishment we used it for was as a structure to be able to teach the behavior.